Hi, I'm Julius Evans, videographer and storyteller here in New Orleans. I am also among the recipients receiving the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation's Community Partnership Grant in Documentation and Media for years 2023 and 2024. For this grant period, I've continued my effort to learn more about traditional jazz, so I've set out on a journey to document the stories of the people who live to jazz. We're going to welcome Eugenia Jeannie Foster Adams.
Okay, that's me.
All right.
I'm also known as Regina.
Regina. See, I never heard that one.
No, if you knew me before high school, you would call me Regina.
Okay. Is that backstory to that?
You want a backstory?
Yeah, let's do it.
My daddy had a dry sense of humor. My godmother told me the story. My mother, who's from Belize, asked my daddy would he want to name me. I was going to be born in the month of July. So daddy, with his dry sense of humor, said, oh, name her Julia. So my mama didn't have that sense of humor, right? What he was really saying, name me Julia. All right?
Wow.
So she got very angry, and she didn't ask him. She named me what she wanted to name me, after her mother, Eugenia. Now, my paternal grandmother didn't sit well with her. So she called me Regina, Creole. So many years later, I said to my dad, do you know my name? Because no one in my family called me Eugenia, even my teachers, my classmates. So my godmother told me the story. And if you knew me before, like I said, high school, you would call me Regina. If you was a family member, you would call me Regina. And if you were my grandmother, you would call me Regina. So that's the name. I gave myself the name Jeannie. I've always talked to myself. And my mom said she thought I was talking to one of my auntie's customers, kids. But I was talking to myself in the mirror saying, hey, baby Jeannie. So that's where the Jeannie comes from.
And that's tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's real tradition. Let's go back to the beginning. And we're going to stay within the subject matter of traditional jazz. Of all the jazz, that New Orleans is known for, traditional jazz is where you find your happy spot.
Jazz, traditional jazz, but I really grew up listening to both traditional jazz and the big band era. I grew up in the 40s, all right? But traditional jazz came in through my aunt who reared me. She played the guitar and the piano. In my family, everybody played an instrument at some time or another on my mother's side. And she introduced me to traditional jazz. And I got to meet a lot of the old timers that people have forgotten all about. All right, I can name a couple of them. Mr. Piku, who was a clarinetist. Mr. Blue, who played a trumpet. And I don't know their real name. Because on a Monday night, these guys would meet at my auntie's house and they would have jam sessions, all right? So I can see them as a little kid sitting around the piano. And one story you would think was interesting that Fats Domino was not always that big.
Right.
And I always thought it was his uncle, but I understand it was his in-law, Mr. Harrison, who used to bring Fats over to play the piano with them when they jammed. And he was not as big man that I knew later in life. He was small. But Mr. Fats Domino, Mr. Harris, Mr. Blue, Sheikah Varaby, whose name is Mr. Cola, Mr. Walter Nelson on guitar, Cornbread on guitar, Mr. Robertson on trombone. I'm trying to think of, he lived on St. Philip Street because his daughter and I went to school together.
But the list goes on, I'm sure, and on and on.
And listen, they all came out of where? Most of them the Treme section.
Treme, okay.
Mm-hmm. I saw these guys perform live in my living room.
So you got sucked into the tradition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, is that what sort of the meaning of tradition? Does it come from that family?
Well, in New Orleans, whether you play it or not, it wasn't sport oriented in my mind. It may be, but in my mind it wasn't. Either you played music, you sang, or you danced. Music was always the front thought mind. And everybody had a piano in their house or someone in the neighborhood. And that everything centered around playing music.
Wow.
And if you wanted to get in my house with my auntie, you needed to come there knowing how to play something, because that's how.
So did you have to know music, or you have to know a song? So you had to contribute, right?
I had to sing or play or did something. So that was my exposure as an early kid. And she taught me how to play the piano at 5, which I switched from the piano when I went to school and played the saxophone, which I turned over to my son. And if you look over there, you see my son's saxophones sitting over there. Yeah, so I was introduced to music at a very early age. My first music teacher was Mrs. Martin. And some of the guys that I played with are well known today in grammar school. It ain't my fault who I call my big brother, Smokey. We all came out
Smokey
to
Johnson?
That's right. I call him my big brother. Of course, he's no longer with us. We lived around the corner from each other. And next to him, you hear him talk about Yvonne Bush. She was very instrumental in teaching most of the musicians that we hear in the city today. She was our neighbor. She lives around the corner, and that was Smokey's first teacher. That man that played with Roy Brown, all those guys. I was the youngest one because my mama put me out the house at an early age. So I was younger than most of my classmates, all right? So I got to play with these guys at an early age. So music, like I said, was a part of me from my foundation as a young kid.
Sounds like this word tradition came up because it was passed down. Well,
and like I started off by saying, every family back in the day, somebody played music, all right? And gathering around, was getting around music. So that's how it was just passed down. Either they were, like I said, a singer, so somebody had to play for that person to sing. It was a tradition. And I think you're talking about the tradition that we have with the jazz funerals. That is not like it used to be, but it was more sacred than it is now. But that was a tradition that was passed down from generation. And as I got older and started studying history, I understand that comes from our African heritage. Me reading and studying, all right? And it's passed down. But not only in the Black culture, in the other ethnic groups, the Italians and what have you, they too had funeral processions. So the tradition followed from one generation to another generation.
So we know now that that word and that meaning of New Orleans music, New Orleans tradition is now linked to commercialization, marketing, tourism. But what I'm hearing is that it was a family ordeal. Mm-hmm. And from my knowledge, I think a lot of the communities, it came out of churches, or the church was all involved in the formation of that tradition, or part of it.
The churches and benevolent societies, because back in the day, Blacks could not have burial insurance and what have you. So the benevolent societies took upon this in the community. It'd probably be a nickel. My grandmother belonged to one called Ignatius, Children of Ignatius, something that I can't remember the exact name. And I used to go with her to collect the money from the members, all right? And that was used to pay for the repairs and pay for the funeral if the family couldn't. And if not, they would just give a donation to the family. But that was a tradition that came from the church and the benevolent societies. So
you're giving us first-person account of what myself have been reading benevolent societies, second lines.
My grandmother was what they would call it was like the parliamentarian, all right?
Okay, parliamentarian.
Right. Yes. And she was in the society, and she also collected dues from the members, so that's how I know about the benevolent societies. And then when I got married, my grandfather-in-law is the co-founder of the Young Men of Illinois. All right, so there was another benevolent society. I had on my married with the family that was into benevolent, and on my own side with my grandmother, who was a parliamentarian in one of the benevolent societies.
Now, was this these organizations? Was it tied to one community in New Orleans, or was there?
Well, my grandmother, I'm downtown.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I'm
Let's
married.
clear that up.
Yeah, I'm from
Let's
downtown.
bring the Europeans in.
Yeah.
What's downtown?
Okay, downtown is anything north of Canal Street.
Okay.
Anything south of Canal Street is uptown. So I'm from downtown.
Okay.
I was born in the 7th Ward, reared in the 6th Ward, which is noted now at Treme, all right? We just said 6th Ward back in the day. My husband is from uptown. So the Young Men of Olympia is uptown. And my grandmother's society was downtown. All right?
Now, for the record, I'm from Mississippi, so I'm from out of town. So, I mean, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
You know, it's a process,
Yeah.
and I think that's what's important is that we get information from one source, but we, you know, sometimes we don't look deep enough to get it from source, and that's what the benefit of having you here and the pleasure of being able to listen to your stories in first-person account. So let's move on up. So here you are, you're getting these skills, you know, and these are the skills that are going to be passed down. So did you have other children, kids, your friends, were they equal parts in this?
Oh, my friends?
Yeah, were they like becoming members or understanding the process of the tradition?
I was a tomboy, so most of my friends, all right, were the guys that I played in the band with.
Okay.
So they're carrying on the tradition today. Like I told you, Smokey.
Yeah.
James Boudreaux, who's no longer with us. James Rivers.
Okay.
James Rivers started off playing the clarinet, and he switched to the saxophone, all right? And what most people don't know, he has a sister who plays the mean organ, all right? Yeah, these are the guys that I played with growing up, and we played from grammar school to high school, and they went on, all right?
Did you have a band name, or what when you say play with?
Grammar school was at Joseph Adolphus Craig, which they call the college.
Okay.
High school, I met the guys in high school at Booker T. Washington, which was called Booker Teleferro Washington. Many people don't know what that T stands for, all right?
Okay.
And I can tell you about, when you're saying about who did I play with, the boys developed a band called the Chapaka Shawees, all right? So the girls in the band decided they were gonna have a band too. We call ourselves the Nightingales. But when our parents found out what we were doing, it wasn't as liberal as it is now, you know, that it didn't last long. But we were gonna have our little girl band too. And we called ourselves the Nightingale.
So it's no surprise that we have female marching bands now, or brass bands.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I never forget one of my instructors, Mr. Sacheret. He was looking at some old pictures of our high school, and he says, "Eugenia, do you remember this picture?" I said, "No, Mr. Sacheret, the girls are wearing pants. They didn't wear pants when we were going to school. We had skirts on."
Right.
So you can tell when you look at pictures, you know, the period in time. And he says, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys didn't wear pants back then." I said, "No, we didn't wear pants. We wore skirts." Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you see traditional jazz, the evolution? How has it evolved from your time?
Well, during my time, when you would see a traditional jazz funeral, it would be more somber. It would be more respectful. And I don't knock the young generation, but I think it's disrespectful to see them throwing a casket up in the air, dancing on top of the casket. And there's the little quotes that they will say, different stroke for different folks. That would have never occurred during my generation. Old folks would have found that as being an abomination. That's their favorite word. All right, that would have been an abomination. When a funeral occurred, for us, people want to know why the funeral and why the dancing and what have you. It's a way to give comfort to the family. If you went to my son's funeral, you saw me out there second lining, because that was a way to release my grief. And the people around me were sharing with me. It gives comfort to the family, all right? And it sort of mitigates the loss that you've experienced. So it was a somberness going to the church, a samba movement leaving the church. And before we had all these highways and byways, they used to do a procession all the way to the cemetery. Once that body was entered, we wasn't doing much entombment then. Most everybody was being interned, all right? The trumpeter would lift up his trumpet and play those 3 notes. That's what they call cutting him loose. And most probably they'll play Didn't He Ramble? And that's when we go into our movement, all right? But you didn't see the thing that you see now. The musicians were very respectful. The uniform of the day, black and white. Either they were in a suit with the white shirt, or they had the black pants, white shirt, and their cover. All right. Right. Today's children, they wear whatever, whatever comes up, is whatever it is, whatever it is. Right. So, but I don't knock it with different strokes, like I said, for different folks. But for me, I like the old tradition because it meant more to me. I think it's just, people just jump in, and now we have tourists who read the newspaper, and they have no idea the meaning and the somberness of it, and they're just jumping in. Right. So I think we've lost the true essence of the traditional jazz funeral.
So from a multicultural point of view, and we mentioned New Orleans being one of the, largest or first multicultural cities, is that tradition that we're talking about, traditional jazz, traditional music, traditional funerals, is that cross all borders?
As I told you, you look at the Italians, they did the same thing.
Okay.
They had procession of funerals, but you didn't see the kind of funerals that you see today, is what I'm saying to you. It was most solemn.
Now we have people coming to your neighborhood to experience this thing that they are trying to understand.
And they have no idea the meaning behind it, all right? And for some of them, they don't intend and don't care to learn the meaning. All they know is a party. It was mostly for musicians, right? Okay. Well-known musicians, they did it. A family of well-known, all right? But now everybody have a jazz funeral.
You're a community leader, and you are part of an organization that basically preserves the dance aspect of traditional jazz. That's a Nicola dance. Can you tell me something about
Nicola dance was going on before. I left New Orleans in 1981 with the closure of the Public Health Service Hospital. And upon my return, one of my college classmates asked me to join an organization with us. And it was at that time, it had changed its name to New Orleans Jazz Celebration. It used to be Louisiana Federation, but the name changed in about 1995. And she asked me would I become a board member. And one of the activities that the New Orleans Jazz Celebration sponsors is Nicola Dance. But Nicola Dance genesis, its birth of it, started with three individuals, private individuals, who got together out of their own pockets, and they sponsored a free dance at a place called Cafe Brazil. And it went so well that they broached Jason Patterson, the owner of Snug Harbor. He was the president at that time of Louisiana Federation. And they asked him, could he see about putting that a part of their agenda? Well, it's history now. It has gone very well, When I came home in 2001, I don't know what year they were into, but they were now under New Orleans Jazz Celebration, not Louisiana Federation. And I can tell you, I just marvel at it because people bring their little kids. It reminds me of my generation when I was small, they're teaching the kids the swing dance and what we used to call hand dance.
Give me a description of what it is that a person will see and experience if they came to one of these dances, and how it ties into tradition.
How it ties in is because the music that played is traditional jazz, all right? Which they now even truncated the term. They don't say tradition, they call it trad jazz. But I still say traditional, all right, traditional jazz. The music that's played is played by musicians who play traditional jazz, all right? And that's what the people are dancing by, the music from traditional jazz area. And it's beautiful.
And who are some of the bands that, I mean, what's one of your favorite?
I love them all. I love them all. You know, I'll tell you some of the artists that draws big attention, all right? And we're praying for him right now, Shannon Powell, right. Herlin Riley.
Two in New Orleans, great drummers.
And then you have Greg Stafford, the trumpeter, right? Leroy Jones, Tom McDermott, the piano player. Just to name a few of them because I can't think of all of them at the top of my head. But those are the guys who really play traditional, you know, jazz. Detroit Brooks with his brother Mark Brooks, all right? And then you have Mark Bro, all right? And we have another young musician that we're praying for, Will Smith. Yes. Another trumpeter. He plays with them around.
Let's tie all this into again. This is we're still talking tradition because everything you
now a younger person who's doing traditional and doing very well and well loved is Kevin Lewis.
Kevin, yeah, my man Kevin.
He's much younger than the other guys that I call, but he's burning it up.
How do you see this going forward? Do you see traditional jazz being lost in the history books, or and if so,
yes and no. Okay. Yes and no. You know, sometimes people think that jazz is dying. I see jazz being alive with the young ones coming along. If you visit places like Ellis Marsalis Center, where they're training young kids, the Moose Jazz Center with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, with Donna Harrison's group, in the summer with Jackie Harrison with the Satchmo Summer Jazz Camp, jazz is alive and well. These young kids, they're picking it up and they're carrying the torch. We just have to support them.
And what does that support look like?
That support means that treat them like they get treated when they go to New York. We don't like to go out and listen to live music because we don't want to pay. If it's sometimes even when it's free, they don't come out, all right? But we have to support the arts.
So what do we need to get that done? We need a safer city. We need
a safer city. We need in the schools to, you know, put it back in the schools. I came up, I had all that exposure in school. They didn't have to have separate organizations trying to save what we invented, all right? I learned, let's leave from jazz. By the time I got to high school, I had seen most of the operas. Why? I went to Craig School, and everything was done at the Municipal Auditorium. That's where the symphony practiced. That's where the opera practiced, all right? And if you went to Craig School, on a Monday was banking day. Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, was the symphony where we went to hear the symphony rehearsal. And Wednesday or Thursday was opera day. So I got exposed to the arts in school. It began at home with me, with my aunt. But the wider picture of art was taught to me at school. And I don't know why we're taking it out the school system. For a while, as a part of the New Orleans Jazz Celebration, I was doing art contests. And it went well. I used to call it the Louis Satchmo, What a Wonderful World Art Essay Poetry Contest. But we can't get the schools to participate because why? Teachers are not there full-time in one school. They're here for a couple hours, so. But the kids had talent. And we need to nurture this talent.
So just throwing this out there, just saying, do you think that some people who don't want to see music on the streets in New Orleans think that is still the devil's music and it doesn't contribute to a wholesome society? Do you think that people are just that narrow-minded? That
Well, you know what's interesting you're saying about what people think? I call them carpetbaggers. The New Orleans, all right? They come to New Orleans, they go to the French quarters, and they're the ones who are making the ruckus in the French quarters. Because natives don't really go to the French quarters, all right? Because too much traffic and parking problem. And then they decide to move here. Then they want to move in the French quarters. And what's the first thing they complain about? The noise. But they were one of the ones that was here making the noise, all right? And they moved to my beloved Treme, where music was always spontaneous, all right? I have a classmate of mine who lived in the project, and he played the sousaphone. And he would take the sousaphone and march from St. Philip Street to Galvin Street, blowing his sousaphone. That's the way our neighborhood was back in that day, all right? But now you have the carpetbaggers who find it's disruptive to have the spontaneity in the neighborhoods when that was a part of our culture. And I feel if they want quiet and they want no noise, move out to the suburbs. Don't try to change our culture. Do as my mom taught me as a kid. When in Rome, do as the Romans. You came and you found us this way. Don't try to change us.
Yeah, you don't go to Italy and try to.
I'm not going over to Italy and tell them how they should listen to their music and how they should dine and partake.
Right.
I'll accept it.
Drink scotch instead of wine. Huh?
That's right. You know.
No, it's not.
I have a problem with that.
Yeah, and it seems to be a problem.
It's a problem, and it's impacting on the culture.
And probably economics of the city.
It's impacting on the economy.
Because it seems like we don't want to.
We don't support.
We don't want to build on one of the greatest resources. You know, that is tourism, the music. You know, it's in our DNA. All right, with me, it's in my DNA. Like the other day, I was a whistler from all my life, right? And I walked into the elevator and I said, my daughter says, Mama, you in that whistling. It's my DNA. I do it spontaneously. I'm not thinking about it, you know. And really when I'm whistling, I'm shutting out, as she said, I'm in my own orbit. And that's the way the musician is. When something hit them, they start playing because it may be something that they're creating at that time. And we don't want to quench that. We want to nurture it. You know, and let it come out. So you are a musician. You embody the spirit of the musician. You played an instrument. So is it fair to say that your mindset is different, or you don't have to be a musician to?
You know, music is one of the gifts that God gave us that we can communicate with anybody, any culture. Any ethnic group, it's transferable. Mm-hmm. It's the one language that's understood. It may be written a little bit different, but it's understood, right? And you can find music to meet whatever mood you're in.
But there's got to be something special about this New Orleans tradition because you've had a history. And that's how.
Yeah, like I said, you grew up with it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it started with me. It started with my aunt.
Yeah.
She played the piano. My mother played the piano, but not like my aunt. I was reared by my aunt when my mother had remarried. So we always had a piano in the house. All right. And she didn't only try to teach me; she tried to teach the kids in the neighborhood. It was music. All right. And then I passed it on to my son. Right. My daughter played at it, and I think out of jealousy, when she saw her brother was playing music, she decided I wanted her to play the flute, but she wanted the clarinet. She played that as long as the sun lasts on a cloudy day, but she went to dancing lesson, and she stayed with that until she finished high school. All right. So the arts has always been a part of me and a part of my family. Right?
Yeah. A lot of Asians are now coming in to learn the music. I mean, slide trombone.
The Asians, you know, You talk to one of the musicians who's traveled. They love our musicians away from here, and they're treated with royalty. And when they come back home, like I said, we don't support them. Something is not right about that setting in that picture.
What do you think is missing? What do you think is?
I think a lack of I think I'm gonna think back to what a teacher taught me one time in school. A visitor knows more about your hometown than you do because you take things for granted. All right. Right. And I think that's what it is. Yeah. Taking things for granted. You know, it was here, it's gonna always be here. But if you don't support it and nurture it, it won't always be here. And that's what people have to understand.
Do you think musicians deserve more money? Because that's on the table now in terms of not getting the rates.
Well, let me tell you a little thing that I observed. I'm not going to call what school it was. They were putting on an affair, and they was going to ask one of the graduates to perform. And they wanted to pay her. Mm. But then they asked Gladys Knight. And when I saw what they were giving Gladys Knight, as opposed to we're going to give this person, all right? And I said, you know, I don't think you are looking at this right. The same amount of money that Gladys Knight paid for her bread, that's the same amount this person over here paid for her bread. Well, she's a graduate. Don't matter. She has bills. We have to stop looking at them for doing stuff for a minuscule amount because they're one of ours. Mm. They have bills to pay. They have obligations to pay. I don't tell you, go overboard, but pay them a reasonable fee that they can sustain themselves, that they don't have to take on a second job. From the beginning of time, musicians always had to have a second job to support themselves and their family. It shouldn't be that way.
So based upon things that are revenue generators now, festivals, and used to be a lot, I assume, a lot more venues for musicians, especially traditional jazz musicians, to perform and make a living. We've had club closures or venue closures. Palm Court is no longer available. So what do you think is the answer?
I understand, talking to some of my friends that's in the business, like you were talking about your diet. People are becoming more health conscious, so they're drinking less. Oh. So they're not, that impacts the nightclubs, all right? Okay. People are not buying, they'll tell me, they'll sit there all night long, Jeannie, holding nursing one glass, So that has an impact on the business of a nightclub owner.
So we got to drink more? Is that?
No, we don't have to drink more.
Okay.
But the people, what they're saying to me, people are not drinking like they used to, which brought in a revenue, all right?
But we have art. I mean, what do you suggest?
Be willing to pay a reasonable amount of price to enjoy good music. Because if you were in New York or Chicago, you would go up there and you pay the fee. Why not pay it here?
So treat it as art, not as core entertainment to go with
right.
your.
Because when you go away from here and you go to a concert, you're going to pay that amount of money there. So why not pay the same thing when you come here? That's what I'm saying. Is treat your family members, because the musicians are our family, the way you want them to be treated. If they're treated, other people treat them, why can't we treat them that way?
So are they not good enough?
No. Okay. That's why they leave. Not everybody's like a James Rivers, who had the opportunity to leave, but he stayed. Fats Domino, because they had opportunity to stay, but they love their city, right? But we should treat them and remunerate them for what they're doing, because they are really our culture barriers.
Okay. If anybody knows anything about you, you're out there. So where will you go hang out? What's your reference or referrals for some of the places now to get the best music, the best traditional jazz?
Right now, for best traditional jazz, the Palm Court is not there anymore. Right. So what we're trying to do with Nicola Dance is to do a tribute to Palm Court by bringing all the bands that played at Palm Court a part of Nicola Dance.
So let's give a plug to Nicola Dance. Now, this is going to happen
In October.
October every year so far, right?
Every year, every Sunday at 4:00. And we're changing our venue. It's not called Cafe Brazil, but it's going to be in the same.
It's still on Frenchman though.
But it's going to be in the same building where it started from.
Okay.
In Cafe Brazil. Okay. But it's a new ownership now.
Right on the corner of Frenchman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
But they be able to hear traditional jazz. Of course, the real place to go for traditional jazz is where? Preservation Jazz Hall. It's been around for quite a while.
But you can't dance there.
No, you can't dance, but you can hear it.
You can hear it.
You can hear traditional jazz, all right?
Very
at
good.
Preservation Jazz Hall. And I think Ben is doing a wonderful job taking over the reins from his father.
Ben Chaffee, yes, yeah.
My son was one of the musicians that had the opportunity to play with the Preservation Jazz Hall.
You want to talk about your son a bit? You want to talk about your son a bit and his contribution to the music? I mean, did you follow him a lot? Did he travel?
Oh, he had an opportunity to travel the world. He had an opportunity. He got his start beginning from me. He started off with the drums.
And your son's full name for the record?
Darrell Anthony Adams, which he hated. Okay. He called himself Little Jazz.
Wow, that's a
big
name.
I called him Darrell Anthony.
Okay.
Because that's what I named him. Okay. And he hated that. And I did it purposely. Darrell Anthony! Anyway, he asked for an instrument, and the first instrument he wanted was a drum. I hated it because all drummers, they don't know how to stop. They beat on any and everything. They beat on you if you let them. You ever watch Shannon Powell?
Oh yeah.
He walks the street, beating the air, right?
Right.
But anyway, he broke the skins, and I wouldn't replace him. So I went in the attic and I got my saxophone, and I gave him his first lesson, and it stuck with him. All right. Yeah, he was one of Danny Barker's proteges. And then after being under his tutelage, he was under the tutelage of the saxophone player, Howard DeJong, with the Olympia Brass Band. So see, he was getting steeped into traditional jazz. And when Mr. Barker wrongly accused of mismanaging the young guys, he turned everything over to Leroy Jones, who was the first person he recruited. And Leroy Jones developed a little band called the Hurricanes. And when Leroy moved on, Darrell developed a band called the Tornado Brass Band. And from the Tornado Brass Band came the Dirty Dozen. That's the evolution from Mr. Barker, Fairview Baptist Band, to the Hurricanes, to the Tornadoes, to the Dirty Dozen. And from there, they all just start flourishing.
So it was Mr. Barker who ignited.
He reignited the traditional jazz band.
Very good.
Yeah, because your original bands were dying out. All right, the original traditional bands were dying. The Eureka Brass Band, the Olympia Brass Band. Those guys were getting older, and they were. So Mr. Barker reignited it, and from him came the Hurricane Brass Band. From the Hurricane to the Tornado to the Dirty Dozen, and now they proliferated. All right. And we've seen the rise. Even have a girl band.
You're also one of the premier volunteers, right? Yeah. There's a whole, in terms of people who are linked to the tradition there.
You know, when I retired, I was in the health field for over 30 years. And when they were called, I said, that chapter's closed. I'm now with my first love, music and art. So don't ask me nothing about healthcare. So if you want to know something about the arts and things, that's where you'll find me.
Very good.
Yeah.
And you're always volunteering everywhere. So your full-time schedule, I know when I asked you about your schedule for this.
I made time for you because I like you.
I like you. And you like traditional jazz.
That's
hopefully
right.
we do justice here. So what do you vision going forward? This traditional jazz. I mean,
I think with schools like Moose's, with the New Orleans Jazz Heritage Foundation, and with Louis Armstrong Summer Jazz Camp, the Ellis Marcellus Center, and with Donna Harrison, and even I can't think of the thing. It's a group that one of the young guys started. I can tell you where they're located. They're now over at St. Peter Claver. They have space where they heard. I think it's going to be alive and well.
And then venues for to hear this
music?
music?
That's the problem. We need to find venues for these young musicians to play. All of them can fit into Preservation Jazz Hall. Besides finding a venue, we have to support them.
So for the tourists who are looking for traditional jazz, don't make the mistake of thinking that you're really experiencing traditional jazz from a brass band. Nothing wrong with brass band. It's in that category. It's all included, but don't get stuck on that aspect of the culture.
We need to find some entrepreneur who's willing to preserve what we have.
What about hotels and restaurants? I mean,
hotels and restaurants they vacillate. They vacillate.
They have their own agenda.
Yeah, they vacillate. Okay. They cater to what's coming in. But if we have another venue like Palm Court, an expansion of Preservation Jazz Hall where they can actually dance, we need to have something like that.
And is this music?
And we the citizens need to support them by going and enjoying the live performance of our family members, because they are part of us. They are our family members. We need to embrace them like other countries are embracing them.
Is there anything else you want to add to this before we wrap this?
Support the arts. Support your music. The arts not only can include music, it covers the visual arts. You have the dances. You have the poetry and the poetry writers. Embrace them all, because that's a part of our culture.
So we need to get jazzed. That's my slug. We need to get jazzed about this.
That's a good slogan. Jazz up for jazz.
Okay, jazz up for jazz. Now I was doing a project, and one of our New Orleans poets, Kalamu Yasalam.
Yeah.
He looked over at my camera and he says, you can live your life without jazz, but it'll be a sad ass life.
Yeah. You can't live without music.
Yeah.
A person who don't have music in their life, is something's wrong with them.
Okay.
Because like I said, you can find music to suit any mood that you're in. It can lift you up, can put you down, but I'm always the one that's going to lift me up. But no, we need to support the arts. And for the educators who are not seeing the need of arts in the schools, they need to just stop and think. Whether you're taking music, vocal or instrumental, whether you're a dancer, whether you're into poetry, all right, whether you're into the visual arts, you all have to do these things. You have to learn how to read. You have to know history, because when I was in music, we had to know who Bach was. We had to know who Chopin was. And you lived here, you had to know who Louis Armstrong was. So you had to know history, reading, writing, and you have to know how to count. 1 and 2, and you have to know how to count.
Yeah.
So the arts cut across every subject matter. It gives you discipline. You take kids that's in music, they're disciplined because How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So it's a discipline.
Carnegie Hall?
Discipline.
Discipline. Okay.
You don't get there by today I'm a practice, today I'm not. You got to discipline yourself. Yeah. Right? It cuts across the subject matter. So why take it out? Yeah. And you'll see that kids who have this, they'll learn much better, because I've seen teachers who take a lesson and put it to music, and it's more absorbed than quicker than that rote method. All right.
Yeah. Well, New Orleans was one phrase, the gateway to the world at one time. So perhaps sophistication got messed up in there with art. So maybe we're a little confused about.
I don't think it's just New Orleans. It's throughout the country. People are not supporting the arts like these artists. And all I'm just asking them to stop and think how arts penetrate every subject matter.
And traditional jazz, traditional music, New Orleans music is a part of that.
It's a part of the New Orleans, a real New Orleans DNA.
Real New Orleans DNA.
It's a part of their DNA.
Well, thank you, Ms. Adams.
You're welcome. I hope I didn't ramble too much with you.
No, I know we hit some great points. Thank you.
You're very much welcome.
All right, great.
And jazz up for jazz. We're going to use that. We're going to jazz up for jazz.